Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into something really quite powerful, humble inquiry.
Mm.
You can think of it as this sort of gentle art of asking questions when you genuinely don't already know the answer. We'll be unpacking this really crucial skill, drawing from Edgar and Peter Schein's book, Humble Inquiry's second edition.
Right. And for you, our listener, the learner, navigating all this constant information, the rapid changes, well, it can feel pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Totally.
Humble inquiry, it actually offers a surprisingly effective way to cut through that noise,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
to understand what's really going on, build better connections.
And avoid that trap of thinking you already have all the answers.
Exactly, which is so easy to fall into.
So our goal today, really sparked by the excerpts you shared from the Shine's work, is to pull out the core ideas of humble inquiry and really dig into why this approach is, well, so essential in our world today, which is, let's face it, increasingly complex and often pretty confusing.
Yeah, definitely.
So get ready to explore. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the book kicks off with this story. Seems simple, but it's very telling. Ed Schein describes seeing these interesting mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and an older woman just feels she has to tell him, quite loudly apparently, that some are poisonous, could even kill him.
Oh, okay. The unsolicited advice.
Right, and Ed's reaction, well, he already knew that. But what really struck him was how this lecture, basically,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't just annoy him, it actually killed any chance of having a positive conversation or even forming a slight connection.
Yeah, that mushroom anecdote, it really strikes a chord, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes you think how often we might be doing that, talking at people without meaning to, and
Yeah.
what that actually does.
Hmm.
It points to this bigger cultural thing, maybe, where we tend to value broadcasting what we know, showing off, winning the argument.
Even if the facts aren't quite solid.
Right. The Shines mention these opinionated distortions, how they kind of creep into everyday talk about what's real, things that might be strategic in, say, politics or debate, but not so great in just talking to people.
And what's fascinating is the question they pose right at the center. Why is asking genuine questions and building good relationships suddenly so critical?
Yeah, why now?
Their answer really hits home in today's world.
Yeah.
We're operating in this landscape that's more volatile, more culturally diverse than ever.
Okay.
So whether we're talking across different jobs or nationalities or even just teams in the same company,
Yeah.
often we genuinely don't get the other person's situation or why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. We lack that context. So that sets the stage. Now let's get to the heart of it. What exactly is humble inquiry?
Well, in essence, it's about showing you're sincerely interested in what you don't know about someone else.
Okay.
And it's built on certain attitudes,
Right.
like a real openness to information, a genuine curiosity about how others see things, and this is key, a willingness to be a bit vulnerable.
Vulnerable? How so?
Well, when you inquire humbly, you're sort of temporarily handing over some conversational power. You're admitting your picture isn't complete.
Okay, so it's definitely more than just firing off any old question. How is it different from other ways we ask things?
Yeah, they draw a contrast with more directive kinds of questions, like diagnostic inquiry, where you're kind of steering the conversation towards something specific you want to find out.
Like a doctor diagnosing symptoms.
Exactly. Or even confrontive inquiry, where your questions might already hint at your own opinion or solution.
Ah, leading the witness.
Sort of. And they really warn against leading questions, the ones that subtly nudge the person towards the answer you want. And also closed questions, which can be a trap.
How so?
Well, they give this great example. Asking a local for directions to Woodford. It's a closed question, right?
Yeah.
Demands a specific answer. But it makes it really awkward for the local to just say, sorry, you never heard of it, or I don't actually know.
Ah, yeah. You're kind of forcing their hand, putting up a barrier to just honest communication.
Precisely. Humble inquiry, on the other hand, they frame it as an investment.
An investment.
Yeah, you invest your attention up front. You acknowledge you don't know everything. You signal, hey, I'm genuinely ready to listen, and I'm okay showing I don't have all the answers.
And the return on that investment
Is gaining real understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in turn, strengthens the relationship. It builds it up in a positive, balanced way.
The book also talks about different levels of relationships. How does humble inquiry fit in with those?
Right. They outline 4 levels. There's level -1, which is basically domination, exploitation. Not good.
It's definitely not.
Then level 1, which is more transactional.
Yeah.
Think formal roles, professional distance. Telling fits really well here.
Okay.
But humble inquiry, that naturally nudges things towards level 2.
Yeah.
That's more personal, built on openness, and crucially, trust.
And what's the big advantage of getting to those level 2 relationships, especially at work?
Well, the benefits are pretty significant, particularly professionally.
Hmm.
Level 2 relationships foster more flexibility, adaptability, resilience within teams.
How does that work?
When people genuinely know and trust each other, they're much more likely to ask for help, right? Or
Hmm.
share critical information, even if it's bad news. They collaborate better because there's that psychological safety.
Makes sense. Less fear of looking stupid or getting blamed.
Exactly. Now, there's also level 3, which they call intimacy. That's more for personal relationships, obviously. In work settings, you generally want to maintain some professional appropriateness, keep things mainly at level 2 to avoid, well, potential issues.
Right, finding that sweet spot of trust and openness for effective teamwork. So, how does this humble inquiry attitude actually show up, like in everyday conversations?
Really key idea here is here and now humility.
Here and now humility.
Yeah, it's that conscious choice in the moment to embrace what you don't understand about the current situation, regardless of your rank or past experience.
Okay.
They use this cool analogy of an actor who only has one line. To deliver it well, that actor needs to fully grasp their purpose in that specific scene right then and there.
Okay, yeah.
Similarly, being clear about your goal in a conversation helps you focus your questions, how you ask, how you respond, even what you choose to share.
Can you give some concrete examples? Bring it to life a bit?
Absolutely. Think about a doctor, maybe super busy, but they start a consultation by saying something like, look, the system puts pressure on our time. Sorry about that. To make the most of the time we do have, what are your main concerns today?
Ah, that immediately creates a different feeling, right? Like your partners.
Exactly. Or think about Ken Olsen, the founder of Digital Equipment Corporation. He was famous for just walking around and genuinely asking engineers, so what are you working on?
But not in a checking up on you kind of way.
No, apparently his interest was really authentic. It wasn't micromanaging, and it built connection across the hierarchy. The book tells this story where Olsen hired a consultant basically because the consultant just showed real curiosity about Olsen's canoe paddles.
Wow. Just like that.
Yeah, it just instantly shrunk that professional distance.
That's amazing. Such a small thing, such a big impact on connection.
It really is. And this is where you see the sort of hidden power of humble inquiry. It can break through logjams.
How so?
There's a case study about an executive succession problem. The senior team had doubts about a candidate, but couldn't quite pin down why.
Okay.
Just one simple, genuinely curious question. What exactly does the VP of administration do day to day? That unlocked it. It brought out their real concern about the candidate's external communication skills.
And they could then address it.
Yes, and find a creative solution.
Hmm.
It's totally different from just asking, what are you working on?
Yeah.
If it feels like surveillance, not real interest.
So the book mentions other types of inquiry too, not just humble inquiry. What are they and what's their effect?
Yeah, they briefly cover confrontive inquiry. As the name suggests, it can be pretty direct, challenging.
Sounds risky.
It can be.
Yeah.
There's this cautionary tale about a boss who, whenever a canning line broke down, just demanded who messed up. He was totally closed off to the real explanation. The equipment was just old.
So the confrontation shut down the actual problem solving.
Completely. Then there's diagnostic inquiry, which we touched on, guiding the conversation towards a specific area. The example was Ed Schein asking about a stodgy culture, which led the COO to realize his own role in it.
Ah, so it can be useful, but it's directive.
Right. And finally, process-oriented inquiry, which is about looking at the helping process itself. Like, how are we working together on this?
Okay.
The main point is, while humble inquiry is often the best bet for building relationships and really understanding things, these other forms can be okay sometimes, if your intention is clear and the situation calls for it. But you have to be really aware of the potential downsides, especially for the relationship.
Now let's switch gears a bit to culture. How does U.S. culture in particular play into how we approach asking questions versus telling?
Oh, this is a really important piece. The authors argue pretty strongly that U.S. culture often values getting tasks done over building relationships.
Task versus relationship focus.
Yeah, we tend to be more individualistic, competitive, and we often really prize telling, showing our knowledge, our expertise.
The culture of do and tell.
Exactly. Where getting promoted often means you now get to tell other people what to do.
Mm.
And there's sometimes this zero-sum mindset, you know. If someone else wins, I lose, which can pressure you to be the first one to tell and stake your claim.
So in that kind of climate, deliberately being humble and asking questions might not always look like a strength. It even seem like weakness.
Precisely. Yeah, the book mentions management students who, when asked what promotion meant, literally said, it means I can now tell others what to do.
Wow.
It highlights this assumption that leaders automatically know best, which can be problematic. The authors even suggest this might feed into things like glass ceilings, and they give an example of a peer meeting where just one person's very assertive telling style kind of poisoned the well for everyone.
Okay, so given all that cultural backdrop, why is humble inquiry especially vital now in the world we live in?
It really comes down to that VUCA acronym you hear about. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity.
The modern world in a nutshell.
Pretty much. And in really complex, interdependent work, think surgery teams, elite sports teams, managing high-hazard industries, the ability to communicate openly, build trust quickly, understand different viewpoints, it's not just nice to have anymore. It's essential for success, even for safety.
Right.
The authors point out this paradox. We kind of intuitively know we work better with people we trust, but we often don't deliberately prioritize building those deeper level 2 relationships.
It really clicks. It's like we praise teamwork, but maybe still reward individual stars more.
Exactly. Think about a relay race.
Yeah.
You can have the fastest runners, but if the baton handoff is fumbled because of poor communication,
Game over.
right, real teamwork, the kind that can handle surprises and complexity, that needs those level 2 bonds. And humble inquiry is how you build them.
Now, what about status and hierarchy? Those are always tricky. How can humble inquiry help navigate that?
Well, in any new group, people unconsciously suss out the status differences, right? The pecking order? Humble inquiry can be a really useful tool here, especially now when traditional status signals, like titles or corner offices, might mean less. By asking broad, open questions, you can learn about someone's role and perspective without jumping to conclusions based on, how they're dressed or whatever.
So it helps you read the room more accurately.
Yeah. The book is this great example of an environmental group's fundraising meeting. They used a dialogic approach, really rooted in humble inquiry, and it built genuine commitment across all the different levels, donors, staff, board members.
It sounds like it levels the playing field for communication a bit,
Well,
regardless of your official title.
exactly. It helps bridge that gap between purely task-focused, transactional relationships, level 1, and the more person-focused, expressive ones at level 2 or 3.
And you're saying the complex work we do now needs more of the expressive kind.
Increasingly, yes. Though, a word of caution. Don't mistake just being casual or informal for a real level 2 relationship, especially in diverse teams where communication norms can vary a lot. Real trust takes more than just calling someone by their first name.
Right, and trust, that's clearly fundamental for this whole thing to work. How do the authors really connect trust and humble inquiry?
Well, it's a two-way street. Humble inquiry both needs trust to start, and it actively builds more trust as you practice it.
Okay.
Trust, in this sense, is believing the other person will be honest, won't use your vulnerability against you, and will stick to what you've agreed on. The fear of being embarrassed or, hung out to dry, that's a powerful social force.
The whole saving face idea.
Exactly. Humble inquiry, because it involves showing vulnerability by asking, creates a space where trust can actually grow. And the author suggests that maybe, just maybe, our culture is slowly starting to reward that kind of openness more, making those level 2 connections more satisfying and effective.
The book also brings in the Johari window. Now, that's a classic model. How does humble inquiry fit with that?
Yeah, the Johari window with its 4 panes: open self, blind self, concealed self, and unknown self. It's a great way to picture communication complexity.
Right, what you know about you, what others know.
Exactly. Humble inquiry really helps shrink that blind self, the stuff others see in you that you don't, by making it safer for them to give you feedback.
Because you're showing curiosity, not defensiveness.
Precisely. And it also encourages sharing from the concealed self what you know, but usually hide, because people feel you're genuinely interested, not trying to trap them.
Okay.
The example of Mergen and Taylor in the book is great here. It shows how humble inquiry opens the door for honest feedback, which leads to better self-awareness and teamwork. It really highlights that communication is like a dance.
A dance of conversation.
Yeah, both people have to cooperate to build that openness and trust. Humble inquiry is like practicing the steps to gently explore the blind spot by making it safe for feedback and also being willing to share from your concealed self when asked genuinely.
That mutual vulnerability again.
That's the key to expanding the open self and really understanding each other.
That's a really helpful visual. Okay, let's move to the OGAR-GI cycle. What on earth is that, and how does it shape our interactions?
Or RJI. It stands for Observe, React, Judge, Intervene. It's a model for how we process things internally when we interact with someone.
Observe, react, judge, intervene.
Okay, it shows how quickly we often go from just observing something to having an emotional reaction, forming a judgment about it, and then doing something intervening.
And our filters affect the observe part right from the start.
Absolutely. Our past experiences, our biases, they color what we even notice. And crucially, the react part, the emotional reaction, can sometimes happen before we even consciously register the facts or at the same time.
Like road rage, getting angry when someone cuts you off without knowing why they did it.
Perfect example. That quick reaction leads to a judgment, that idiot, and maybe an intervention like honking or yelling. It can lead to really hasty judgments and actions that aren't based on the full picture.
So the trick is to deliberately insert humble inquiry into that cycle before you jump to judge and intervene.
That's exactly it. The authors really emphasize practicing humble inquiry before you react impulsively.
Yeah.
Just asking yourself internally, okay, how am I reacting right now? Why? That creates a vital pause.
Buys you some thinking time.
Yes, the story they tell about the graduate student who snaps at his daughter for interrupting him, he just reacted emotionally, judged her interruption negatively, and intervened with anger. Instead of humbly asking, hey, what's up? Why are you here?
And then the conversation with his wife afterwards helps unpack that.
Right. Looking at that whole exchange through the ORJI lens shows the key questions we need to ask when things go wrong. What did each person actually do? What were they feeling? What assumptions were they making? What could they have done differently? Often the answer involves going back to that initial observation and asking if your feelings and judgments were based on what was really happening right then or on old baggage.
Finally, the book is realistic. It admits that actually doing this, adopting humble inquiry, can be tough. It might not feel natural, especially with those cultural habits we talked about.
You're absolutely right. It often means consciously unlearning those deeply embedded habits of telling, of jumping in with answers.
Unlearning sounds hard.
It is. The authors talk about the two anxieties, survival anxiety, the fear that if we don't change, we'll lose out somehow, and learning anxiety.
Learning anxiety.
Yeah, the fear tied to the learning process itself.
Yeah.
Feeling incompetent as you try something new, worrying about looking foolish, maybe even questioning your own identity as someone who knows things.
Okay, so how do we overcome that?
We need to lower the learning anxiety. Make the new behavior humble inquiry seem worthwhile, not threatening, and actually possible to learn. That means needing support, practice, a safe space to try. And they specifically warn against that whole fail fast Silicon Valley mantra when it comes to human relationships.
Why is that?
Because rebuilding trust after a misstep, that takes time. You can't just iterate quickly on relationships.
Good point. So what are some practical things we can do to unlearn telling and learn asking?
They give some really useful ideas, like consciously slowing down your pace in conversations, varying how you respond instead of just jumping in.
Okay.
Setting aside specific time, maybe with colleagues you trust, just to practice asking humble questions. Mindfulness can help too, becoming more aware of your own internal reactions and biases.
Reflecting after the fact.
Yes, reflecting on your conversations, using humble inquiry questions about your own performance. They also suggest engaging your inner improvisational artist, being more present and spontaneous, really listening actively, and learning from group interactions, like using a plus delta exercise after meetings to talk about what went well and what could be improved in the communication process.
This has been incredibly insightful. Just to wrap things up, what's the main takeaway you really want our listener to hold on to from this deep dive into humble inquiry?
I think the core message is that humble inquiry isn't just a technique. It's really a fundamental attitude, a vital skill for getting along and getting things done in today's complicated world. By deliberately choosing to ask with genuine curiosity, instead of just defaulting to telling, we can build much stronger, more resilient relationships. And we gain a much deeper, truer understanding of what's actually going on around us.
It's not just about being nicer, is it?
Not at all. Moving from that transactional level 1 to the trust-based level 2, it creates psychological safety. And that means teams feel safe bringing up problems early, which leads to way faster, more effective solutions. That's a real competitive edge today.
Absolutely. And for you, the learner, we really hope you'll take a moment to think about your own communication habits. Maybe think about specific times, recent interactions where stepping back and asking more humbly might have led to one of those aha moments, or just a better outcome at work or even at home.
Yeah, can you picture a situation recently where maybe asking one more question instead of giving your opinion might have changed things?
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. In a world that seems to constantly reward being certain, having the quick answer, What could we actually gain by embracing our uncertainty sometimes? By cultivating this gentle art of asking?
Think about all the untapped knowledge, the deeper connections that might just be waiting to be discovered, if only we choose curiosity over the conviction that we already know.